Okay, let's see here. Goes on. It's in the process. Not shuffling. All right. We are just about ready. I need to get the chats all situated over here. Oh, this one is not paused, just behind a little bit, I guess. That preview is actually quite a bit further behind. Interesting. Twitch is past that though, so it's not quite the same. Okay, doesn't matter too much. Want that to be so big. All right, there we go. Good morning to everybody. Happy Saturday. If you are new to the stream or catching this in the future and you haven't watched any of my streams before, hello and welcome, first of all. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Tim. I go by FoamyGuy on GitHub and Discord, as well as Twitch, although I was late to the party on Twitch, so it's FoamyGuy_Twitch over there. On this stream, I tend to work on CircuitPython stuff most typically, although occasionally I branch into other things. Generally always programming, but here and there I've popped on to play games. But usually this is going to be programming. That's what we're doing today, and in sort of the most typical fashion, I'll be working on some CircuitPython stuff today. If you haven't watched anything of mine before, if you don't know what CircuitPython is, you can learn more at CircuitPython.org. CircuitPython is basically an implementation of Python that runs on tiny computers called microcontrollers. In particular, today, the ones that I am messing with are the Metro S3, which is not listed as... Maybe I should have gone with Metro. This one, ESP32S3, and then also I have here a Feather TFT S2 and or maybe S3 also, I'm not sure. But let me take a quick step backwards. I dove straight down in there. If you are new, then you're not going to necessarily have heard this before, so bear with me for the folks that have. CircuitPython runs on these tiny computers called microcontrollers. These things plug into your PC, your regular computer. They show up like a thumb drive. Then you can edit a Python code file on that thumb drive and save it. And when you save it, the computer chip that is on these devices will read and interpret and execute that Python code that you saved into the file. Lots of these microcontrollers come with various peripherals already built in, and then it's also somewhat typical for them to have what are called I/O pins, like along the sides of this green chip here. Those allow you to hook up other hardware, whatever you want, be it lights or sensors, buttons, beepers, buzzers, speakers, sensors, any kind of little electronic widget that you could imagine probably. You can hook it up to these microcontrollers, and then with CircuitPython, you can write Python code to interact with that hardware. So that is like the 50,000-foot view, so to speak, of the stuff that we work on most frequently on this stream. In more specificity today, I will be diving back into what we worked on, I think, last week on the stream. Did I do that over the weekend? I definitely did this on the Friday. I think for a deep dive, I think I was looking into it some as well on Saturday, but I'm not 100% remembering what I worked on last Saturday at this moment. But I know we did last Friday. HTTP server, this is a library that runs in CircuitPython that allows you to host an HTTP server on the microcontroller. So some of these microcontrollers, including the ones that I am working with today, have a Wi-Fi chip on board. So this Metro ESP32S3, which I am using primarily, that ESP32S3 is a main computer, a main chip that happens to also have Wi-Fi access. It's underneath this thing here. It's got a little, I think, like antenna trace on the board there going back and forth, so it can kind of like join Wi-Fi networks and interact with things that are on the network, be it sending requests to other servers on the network, or in our case, hosting our own server and allowing other computers on the network to send requests to us. In particular, what I'm interested in looking at today is seeing if we can use this utemplate, or I presume it is probably, it's supposed to be pronounced as microtemplate. So the U is actually the U, like a special U, like for micro meters and liters and things like that. I think it's a symbol for that stuff. I think that's where the U came from. I'm actually not 100% positive, but that's kind of my understanding. But that's why there's a bunch of these that will have U and then the name, like ULab, and CircuitPython is kind of the same way, and it's actually pronounced Microlab, even though it's spelled ULab. Anyway, this is another one of those. It's a Micropython library that is a templating engine. Templating engine is used for basically, I mean, at a broad generic level, a templating engine is used for rendering some strings into another string, a template. And so oftentimes what this is used for, and indeed what I intend to use it for, is HTML templates. So you would create an HTML page, but some portion of the page would be variables, like with these kinds of things here. Imagine a web page that says like hello, and then it has a variable for a name, right? And then once you log in, it stores your username somewhere in there, and then when it renders that template, it populates the name variable with your username. So then when you actually look at the page, it's going to say, hello Foamy Guy, or whatever your username is. This is an engine that allows us to fill in those templates with the variables, and indeed it can even do more fancy things beyond just simple variables. It can have bits of logic. It can have potentially loops. Loops, while loops, and include other templates. So this is a common type of I mean, I guess software, a common type of library that's used along with HTTP servers in order to allow that server to render its data, whatever data is stored in the database. You eventually want to render that onto some web pages, some HTML pages for a user somewhere, looking at that page in a browser to be able to see. This is one way to achieve that, to populate in that dynamic data into that template. Allows you to kind of keep your data separate from your pages. That way, you wouldn't want to have to completely change your HTML every time you get a new user, for instance, right? You don't want to make one user homepage for every user. You want to make a template and then fill it in. So that's what this library does. I'm hoping we can use it in CircuitPython, even though it is a Micropython thing. These are all TPLs and not Python files, though. So one thing is it's got one that's made as a command line, it looks like, which that part I'm not as interested in. Good morning, Paul Cutler. How's it going? Hope you're having a good weekend. Let's see here. Function calls. So I don't necessarily want to I don't want to do this as a command line thing. What I want to do is from my Python code, from my CodePy that's running my CircuitPython HTTP server inside of there, I would like to have some code that says open this template file, read it to a string, and then render is typically the verb that's used for this concept. So render it by filling in all the data, and then that's going to give you another string, and that string contains the HTML code, so then that's what you could return as the response. Yeah, which is not going to be very it's the way that I'm thinking of is not going to be minimal memory usage, because it's going to have to keep a copy, I think 2 copies to be honest, the template copy and then the filled in copy. I think both of those will exist in memory at the same time. So this is all about the command line one, I think. Web application, that's what I'm looking for. So I think is PyCopy? I'm pretty sure that's like AMPy, isn't it? AMPY, isn't it? This is a thing to copy stuff to the boards, the MicroPython boards, when because they don't show up as thumb drives in the same way. It's my understanding, at least. PyCopy aims to develop minimalist, lightweight, extensible implementation of Python. Oh no, this is totally different. What is this? PyCopy is a C scheme and I don't know what those are. PyCopy works similarly well in the cloud. Oh, it's another different fork, actually, it looks like. Oh, okay, I don't know. PyCopy, I didn't know about this one. Is this the teensy person? TJRC? JRC? No, probably not, because there's no S. Hmm. Okay, this is not at all what I was thinking. It's definitely not a thing to copy stuff to the device. It is a different kind of version of Micropython, it looks like. I do want to see the... Yeah. Well, interesting. They're using Pico Web. I'm not familiar with that one. It looks pretty similar to HTTP server, though, as far as the way these are working. Trying to find the template rendering. Let's see here. So we have... Sonify. Homepage archive note. Templates. There are templates. Has args notes. So is it must be that AW writer? AW write a write iter. Oh, load template. Then it says response AW writer. Bit tricky. It's kind of factored in there pretty deep. I wonder if we can find like set up upip. Utemplate source loader. So for render, which is what I want to do, we need to get the loader. We need to just call loader.load. That's going to be the file, I think. Probably the file name. Then it's calling render on all the rest of the arguments, which can be the variables. But that's so weird that it's for x in render. Where did I get render from? Oh, render came from loader.load. Okay. So I think we want to try to import loader. And make a loader. What is package? None. Okay, so we go make a loader with none and dot. Then we call loader load on a file. Then we call, and that's going to give us, they call it render. I'm inclined to call it like loaded template or something like that. And then, well, no, okay, I guess that's why they called it render. So we want to call, so it's it returned a function to us, and then we call that function. And that function is iteratable. It can be used inside this for in. Very interesting. Okay, let's get this cloned. I do have the Metro plugged in. We're going to save off whatever's here, which is capture the flag game. So we're going to take utemplate, we're going to put it in lib. Start with, we're just going to really hope that the import works. So I'm not 100% sure it's going to. utemplate.source, and then from utemplate.source, it got loader. So we want to import utemplate source. And put it into the REPL. Fingers crossed. Okay, good news so far. We want to make a loader. I don't have a template file. I should probably make a template file before we get too far. You know, the nice thing is we're in REPL. Well, I think I turned off auto reload anyway as well, but so I don't want to. So I'm going to make it as an HTML file. They recommended using TPL, but if I do new HTML file, I get a bunch of boilerplate. Have I tried replacing .com in GitHub with .dev? Maybe. Is that the thing that takes you to a like a web-based IDE sort of thing? If that's what it is, I do think I tried it one day. If it's not that, then probably I have not tried it. File. Let's call this first. Oh, I can actually choose here though. Right, forgot about that. Oh no, but it put HTML on it. Okay. Name it. But that's also going to break my text highlighting and everything. I don't want to put that back actually. Whoa, what are these? Okay. So if a username gets passed in, it should get populated to here. So then it will say hello and then whatever the name is. Okay, so we go loader. It is what you said. Okay. Yeah, I think I did try it. Only kind of like just real briefly once. Package they had was none, which I don't have, but I'm just going to put none. Go dot. That should be fine because I assume that's like the root of the drive, what that's going for there. So yeah, it's so interesting to me that you get a render function from calling I wonder what that's about. It's going to delete something, right? Loader.compiledPath? Compiled path? That's deleting the old copy of it, I guess. Because this one is like saving it to the disk also, I think, maybe. Something. I don't know what it's doing, actually. This is more like what we want. So loader.load the name of our file. Loader dot, it looked like capital? No. Load name of our file. First template.pl.html. Read-only file system. Trying to load it as writable. Okay, so one thing we could do is if we had our template on the SD card, I guess maybe we could do that. I mean, the thing is, though, I don't really want to write to the disk. I think I prefer to just keep it in memory. 183 inside load. I see. Yeah, so we kind of have the problem that it's hard-coded to want to use the file. Is there a button? There's the boot button. That's not, I can't use that though. There's a boot button, there's an on-off switch, there's a reset button. So that's using compiler. It says make a new compiler from file in and file out. Call c.compile. I'll close on both of those. I'll superload. Loader comes from compiled loader. Is there a different kind of loader? Compiler. Huh, I do not quite get that part. Why we're returning an import thing here? Not sure what that's. Source. Wait, which one are we using? Using any yet? We were in the REPL. We did import utemplate.source, which has compiler class, has loader, extends compiled loader. But then load writes to a file and then calls super, which is returning this import. I use compiler directly? Compiler takes file in, file out, and then two ints and a loader. Input open as inc, so input open, that's going to open the file. And that means we do have to use loader. Dang. I do kind of wish this had the option to run in memory. I did not realize it was so heavily tied to the disk. Okay, so your template could also be a Python file. In my case, I'm not actually using Python file though as the template. So then if it was a Python file, that might be why you want to import it. Although I think it'd be a different step in my mind. Finally, there's a loader which will automatically recompile a template module if the source changed. Okay, so recompile we don't need. That's not helping us. Okay, so I think I am absolutely going to want to modify this probably. So I'm just going to fork it. Before we get much farther. Okay, so what is the difference between render and compile? Render sounds better, actually. Render, but I didn't call compile. I called render, actually. Yeah, I did load. That gave us render. Well, but it failed because we couldn't load. Yeah, I was not calling compile, okay. But render calls load, and load assumes that you want to write your file. Well, render requires calling load, I should say. Render or load returns the function that is render. It's still super crazy for me to wrap my head around. Not sure if you already know, but you can replace with dev. You'll have nice VS Code. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm not super big on VS Code. In fact, I like PyCharm quite a bit. If I'm honest, I just like my IDE being local so I can have the terminal and stuff and especially right now, because the code we're looking at, this code right here, is actually stored on the microcontroller. I don't have a camera set up to show you right now, but I have a USB cable that is plugged into this device here, and then that is showing up on my computer as this drive right here, CircuitPy, and so it shows up like a thumb drive, and then Python is actually PyCharm, I should say, is actually editing the files on there, which I don't think the browser will be able to do as easily. But secondarily, if I could be honest about it. I don't really want my browser just accessing files on a drive that's plugged into my computer, even if it is convenient. I do play with VS Code a little bit sometimes. I started trying it out. It's pretty cool. So I really want to use, I guess, compiler. If I could use compiler, but you need loader as well. I wish I could use compiler without loader. And then what I could do is maybe fake the F out, and instead of do open as writable, I think isn't there like IO? Bytes file IO? I think I could give it this thing instead of this, and then I'd be able to get the data back out of there as well, I think, somehow. Cross that bridge when we get to it. But in order to do that, we need to make it so that it's not relying on loader. Luckily, it only uses it in one place. It says with loader input open as inc. So really, it's only using loader to get the file. Wait, what? Parse statement, loader, input, open. No, I don't know what it's doing. This might be a bit over my head. I totally did not realize that it was so heavily tied to the files. I guess I could try making it writable. The truth is, though, I don't want to do that in the final, whatever final version of this project there would be. Ultimately, what I want is one that does it in memory. Have RP2040 and a couple others. Nice. Mostly a hobby. Yeah. It started as a hobby for me, and it's now my my one day a week job. Mondays usually, but it's still also a hobby, as you can see me here working on it on Saturday. Yeah, I don't get that actually, because compiler, we passed it file in, right? Why does it need loader and then loader input open? What is input open? Loader. Wish I could control click and this would go to the right spot. It did. Okay, that's nice. And this is just opening a file. But we already passed it. Do we not? Because we have file in. But that's saying with self.loader.input open, saying tokens 0. Everything except the first character? Or everything except the first and last character? Everything except the first and last character. Which is very bizarre. With loader, input open, tokens 0. Are tokens the things wrapped in brackets? Maybe tokens are the things wrapped in brackets, and so it's removing the brackets? Does it use 2? No, it does. Yeah, it uses 2 characters, though. So it would need to be 2 and -2. Why would we want to be removing the first and the last? That says path equals package path, which we put as none, I think, which then got set to empty, looks like. Directory we did as dot slash template. This is include. Okay. This is being able to open another file. And it's getting rid of the quotes. Okay. Yeah. Dropping speech marks. Hi, by the way. How's it going, Tyeth? Yeah. You're all right. The quotes is what you meant. Seems like it just above the code. Yeah. 68. Let me take a look at what it was. Yeah. So then, yeah, these ones are doing the brackets here. Yeah. But that is only the include. You know what I'm going to do to start with? I'm just going to, since that's the only thing that uses loader, I mean, honestly, we could just... In my case, I'm using dot anyway, right? We're not using package. We're not using... we're not using a different directory. I don't remember what the name of the argument was, but we passed dot for it, so we should be able to just say open the file name, right? And it should work, I think. Basically the same as I think it was readable. Of course, now I can't click to it anymore. Oh, weird. Actually, it just says open. What happens if you don't pass that to open? I didn't know you could do that. I thought you had to pass R or W. I mean, it should be reading, though, right? We're just reading from another template, right? I don't see why it would need to be writing. I should start putting this code in a file so I don't just have to retype the first lines over and over again. So I'm going to say for part in render, I'm just going to print. Oh, but we still have the problem of we can't call load because it's going to R is the default. Okay, nice. I didn't know that. We don't really want to call load, actually. We want to call directly to compiler. Which comes from source also. We should be able to get it the same way. We're going to give it the in file, which is our template. Is it supposed to be a string? Probably supposed to be a string. We need to give it the out file. Oh, but that's where we get tricky, because if we give it the out file and it's expecting a string, we need to change it. File out is file out. We don't want to call open. We're going to pass it a file IO, which I think is pretty much basically already an open file. Again, this is only for include. I'm not even going to use include to start with. Oh, okay. Actually, it's in loader.load where it was calling open. So we actually can say input file equals open the template. It's so weird that so it's this this part, the way this works is so weird to me that it render returns an iteratable thing that you can then for loop over, but it's also saving a file. It's like outputting to two places. How's it going, C. Grover? Good morning. Okay, so we're going to open that. We're going to do read. We're going to make an output file, but it's actually going to be an IO file IO. I have no idea how to make. Looks like it doesn't have anything else, so we'll see how it goes. Output file. And then what else do we need? Compiler. Leave that default. We'll leave that default. Loader, we made it so we're not using it. So we'll just leave it as none, and it won't matter. Which is also the default. Okay, so we have our compiler. And now we call c.compile. And then sequence. I don't know, what is sequence? C.compile. So interestingly, this calls c.compile, but doesn't do anything with the results. Just writes the files and then returns that super load, which is calling import. Compile does return something, though. I don't know what's, I mean, I assume seq is sequence? But I don't know what that means, really. Sequence of tokens, or sequence of lines, maybe? Not sure. I guess let's catch it and print it. Why not? So let's call, I'm going to say compile result equals c.compile. Oh, this does actually want something else, doesn't it? File is unfilled. I don't know how to do that. This is gonna be regular file IO. We need like give it this one. Or maybe we want string IO. Yeah, I think actually string IO might be what we want. I don't know what file IO is. Yeah. That's actually having a file, which is what we don't want. We want just in memory. We want a variable in memory that tricks some other piece of code into believing it's a file that's been opened, which is, I think, actually this one, IO string IO, I think is what we want. We give it initial data. Our initial data will just be empty. Do I need to give it empty string? Not sure if it matters. Okay, output file, compile result. So let's print compile result, and then let's I don't know if you need to call close on that or if it matters, but I will. Print the compiled result, and we'll see what we get. Still called loader.load. Zero. Okay. Can I still print my output file after I close it? Yeah, zero, I don't know. Zero, our sequence was zero. That apparently does not do very much for us, so I guess it makes sense why that one wasn't catching it. We could say maybe if I just print the output file at this point, does that... Okay, string IO. Okay, can I do output file.read? Except is it not going to work because I opened it... Oh no, I didn't actually open it. I was going to say I opened it as writable, but that's not true. IO operation on a closed file. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have closed it. Fair enough. Didn't print anything. I think I need a seek probably also. Because I think as we write to it inside of this thing, it's moving our seek position, which is a thing you don't usually pay attention to in files, at least I don't. I think maybe we need to go back to 0. What? So for one thing, I didn't pass the variable. I just called compile with no variables. That doesn't take variables. Where did the variables come from? Boy, I might be in over my head here. There actually is not a example with variables. Well, the only example with variables is the utils thing, which is a command line. Hmm. Well, I guess the thing is, yeah, I mean, I don't know why I would expect. Auto-generated file. Is there more to it? Because, like, well, there can't be, because that's the end of. That's just going to return the string of the name. Oh boy. I don't know that we're going to make it on this one. So heavily tied to writing the file and then importing it. I don't really understand how that can work, though, to be honest, because like the template I want to use is HTML, right? It's not Python. It's if you call import on it, it's gonna just crash your program. But I mean, this one is doing it somehow. It says app._load template, which gives it note.html. This comes from .app. There's more layers. So we have a DB app, which extends a Pico web app. We don't have a Pico web. Pico web has a load template, apparently. Sample web app. Framework. Okay, so this is like an alternative to HTTP server that we are using. It's on usync.io. Intended to be used with template, soft dependency. Okay, I'll try to find the load template. Okay, load template takes template name. If template loader is none, import utemplate source, make the loader with the directory of templates, return template loader load, template name. And we get the template. Get the template and we create a dictionary, which then gets dumped into this awrite iter. Inside our dictionary, we have a field called note. The value of the field called note is the thing that was returned from calling temple, which is our loaded template. Let me look at the example one of these. Is there a simpler template thing? I wish it wasn't buried through so many layers of classes and things. I wish there was more just like open template, render template style example, which I guess is the utils file, but I'm not intending to use it as a command line thing, so it kind of... So a write must be asynchronous, and then a write iter is like asynchronous write iterator. This doesn't have any templating. Oh, it does actually. Squares, app, render template. What is app? Where did app come from? Oh, okay, app is web app. Oh, shoot, that is not at all the right thing to pass here. I created I opened the file, I created an open file variable, but I never changed the part here where we were passing the string before. Hey, thanks for the raid there, Producer Wolf. Appreciate that, my friend. Hope you had a nice stream. Yeah, rock on. What's if you I understand if you got to head out or something like that, but if you got a minute, feel free to drop in the chat. I'm interested in what you were working on. Super hot in my room. I gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's try it this way. Fingers crossed. Maybe we just lucked out on didn't actually do it right, and it does work. Oh yes. Wait. Well. Okay. So it's still a function that has a yield of a multi-line thing. So we do still have kind of the problem of it has returned to us a string that contains Python code that contains a function that when you call it, it returns the yield of the multi-line string. Like what I really want to get is just the multi-line string. I mean, the like ham-fisted way to do this is just replace this with nothing, right? Potentially the triple quotes, I guess. Whoops. Making some music. Nice. What kind of music are you into making? Like guitar or drums or some kind of like techie thing with the computer more so, like sequencers and stuff like that? I'm not particularly musically talented. I like to play around with sequencers and MIDI stuff, things like that sometimes though, but I definitely would not consider most of the things I make musical in nature. They're more on the noisy side than the music side, but I have fun with it. We want to replace this crazy string, which we're actually going to give it a multi-line string. Replace auto-generated file, def render, yield. Ooh, how do we triple quote inside of a triple quote? Ooh, I don't think I've ever run across that before. Python escape triple quote inside multi-line string. Okay, pick it. Whoops, 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 whoops. Oh my goodness, PyCharm. Okay, that was a bit too many. That looks so funky. Okay, replace that with nothing. And then we also want to cut the last 3 characters, which are going to be the other set of triple quotes. This is not going to work. I just noticed this has... Oh man, it is so hard to just get the rendered template into memory. It's so like I'm doing the old push the boulder up the hill, it feels like, with this library. It's so heavily meant to be written and then imported in this weird way. I can't just do this. I have to get a way to call this render function. Hmm. So, I mean... like, seems absolutely awful and something that you should never ever probably do, but you could maybe call this on this. And then afterwards, the render function should exist, I think. So then maybe finally we can do this. But PyCharm doesn't realize the render function will exist. In fact, I'm not even sure if that's going to actually make the render function exist or not. Username is not defined. Okay, so we did not pass our username, which... where do you even do that? Oh, I think it would be to render, I guess. Is it... and I mean, it's expecting username, so we would have to be like username equals. That still didn't work. I mean, is it expecting it to be here? Pass it to exec as a second parameter. Doesn't take keyword arguments. Okay. Yeah, that one actually did work. Um, if we were to look at this in a browser, I don't know if we would get new lines. I don't really want the new lines there. That's not like a... If we get rid of those, is that going to get rid of the new lines? Probably not. Oh. Okay, I mean that looks like it's just part of how it substitutes them in. Let me get a look at that file again. Do I have to seek after I read? Probably want to print a separator. So. Okay, yeah, I think I do have to seek after I read, which is why when we ran exec, it did not give us the render function. It probably execed an empty thing. So yeah, it does. It says render, and then it does say hello, triple quote. That's gonna end the triple quote here, and then it says yield string username. Then it says yield, and it starts a new triple quote. I don't know. Maybe those new lines won't matter. It's worth trying to look at this in a browser. I don't know though. I mean, like, I don't like this, right? We definitely don't. I don't think we want. I don't think we want to be calling exec on. It's part of the deal, I guess, right? It's just how it's made. I don't know. That's pretty scary though, right? Passing. It's like it's ultimately it's a string that contains, potentially stuff that came from the user. So stuff that we ought not to necessarily trust all the way. So it does not feel great to just effectively kind of like execute it straight up. I mean, we know it's going to be def render, I guess. Real question is, could you like break out of the template context? I don't know. I probably would not recommend hosting it out on the open internet. I do want to serve the page, which is on my local network and thus slightly less scary. This is CodePy. I'm going to save CodePy as template compile example. Oops. I'm going to... Oh no, is the chat gone? Where'd the chat go? Device not connected? How long has that been gone for? I have no idea how that happened either. Okay. Yeah, hopefully that will come back. The Discord chat is the one that's on the screen for any folks that are watching. But I can see the other chats as well. I can see the Twitch chat and the YouTube chat as well. Okay, we want a basic HTTP server example now. I will just grab the kind of like start and pull, a little bit more than serve forever. I'm going to start with that one. So that is going to have a static of static, which can serve index HTML. Let's make sure that works. Imagine actually having a Twitch following. Yeah, I mean, I don't have that much of a Twitch following either, but at the end of the day, like, I pop on here because I'm going to be working on this stuff anyway, and sometimes people have a nice time watching along, so I don't know. I'm not after a huge following personally. Yeah, so let's make sure that works. So let's save that, run it. We have server on 154. Let's make sure that's working. 192.168.154. That is on port 80. It did serve by default index, which has hello world and a input button, it turns out. But we don't care about that right now. That does prove our server is working, so we can maybe make a new one of these. Def template test server route slash template. Get request is default. This takes a request. Okay. We're going to want to return a regular response because our response is going to be a string. If you had like an SD card, yeah, maybe the way to go is not completely mangle this library so that you can use compile directly and then file IO like I've done, or string IO, excuse me. Maybe the best way is actually to just use it on a device with an SD card, which can have writable access, and then use it the way it was intended, where it's rendering into a file on that SD card, and then from there you could even just return a file response with that file. It's like a temporary file, so it writes a new one anytime it gets the new request or whatever, and it could return it back. Yeah, that's probably the better way to go about this. I mean, like, avoiding the exec is one nice thing, but I guess the truth is, like, the real one is ultimately doing the same thing, right? It's not calling exec, it's calling import, but this is executing the code in there as well, right? So we have, I think, the same concern of if somebody manages to get some squirrely string inside there, like, they could potentially execute arbitrary Python code. I don't really understand the way that the whole thing is working, so there's some chance that that's already guarded against and that it's not actually possible, but I like, theoretically, it's possible if they could give it some kind of special string that gets it to break out of the sort of HTML and get back into just Python. So we want to do all this stuff in our example. How's it going, Johnny? Hope you're having a nice day today. So we'll input file, we'll open that, we'll output file, we'll do all of this stuff. You don't really need to print the compile results. That was just 0 anyway. I don't really know what that 0 represents, but not very helpful to us if we're, to be honest about it. So let's just get rid of that. Input file, close, all right. We need that. Output file, we do need to seek. Yeah, I guess the reason that it's using exec, effectively, or import in the case of the real one is in order to make things like if and for work, right? If you didn't use exec or import, you'd have to have a lot more code because you'd have to actually implement the logic of if and for and while. Whereas by using exec or import, we're making it so that those syntaxes work without us really having to write any extra code because they're part of Python itself. Which is kind of cool, actually. It would also make it so you could do math, I'm pretty sure, in your templates. So, like add two numbers together or something like that. Wonderful sunny summer day in Sweden. Probably the last one. Nice. Glad you got a good one. Yeah, we're still fairly sunny here. Heating up a bit for the day. I've been out there a fair amount today, getting the sprinkler moved around. We got some new grass seed put down. Okay, so we're seeking to 0, and then we want to call exec. Yeah, I don't know what happens too. Is this only usable one time? The other thing is, like, this is always going to make a function called render, and then we're going to call exec, which is going to, like, define a new function called render. But, like, two things. What happens to the old function called render? Does that get cleared from memory, or are we just continuing to add new functions to memory forever? That's question one. Question two is, since they both have the name render, does it actually work? Like, in our example here, we're only going to have one template so far. We're only going to render it with one variable, but what if we had two URLs and two different templates? Then we're going to call exec, and both of them are going to give us a render function, but that render function is going to have two different strings inside of it. So which one, like, does the newest one always take precedent? I do not know. Okay, so then we call render, and we have to give it a... Well, this actually only worked when I added it here. I think it did not work when I passed it here. So we have to actually create the variables. I'm going to use a dictionary, though. I'm going to make a dictionary called context, because this is kind of how Django terms it. What sort of web page are you going to server? It's a good question. I don't honestly have an exact thing in mind necessarily. Partially, I want to just see if this is possible. The closest thing I would say that I have to an actual plan for using this, I would say, is my recent Capture the Flag project, which is an HTTP server that runs on a microcontroller, and it's like a Capture the Flag game, if you're familiar with that, or if not, it's like basically it's a thing that security, like cybersecurity hobbyists and people in that industry have these Capture the Flag kind of like games or competitions where you look at a vulnerable piece of software and try to find vulnerabilities which have quote-unquote flags hidden inside them. So it's like penetration testing a fake application, essentially. This one is a web one. These CTFs come in all sorts of flavors. This one, though, in the code, I have done something kind of similar, like... where's index? Or profile, that's a good one. So profile, so what I've done in this one is I loaded an HTML file, a template, and then I just use this super duper low hanging fruit of straight up string replace username with username. So this only works for substitutions. It's completely like fragile because this space right here and at the end, like, it would break if you didn't have this. So this is probably the first and only thing necessarily that I have specifically planned where if I can get these templates working, I would use it inside this project. But that being said, like, I don't know, web servers on microcontrollers is just one of the things I'm interested in tinkering with lately. So I would not be surprised at all if other small ideas pop up. There's a couple examples I'd like to make for the HTTP server repo. Like a file upload example would be a cool one, I think, to have. And then it could have templates in it, potentially. Or I mean, if I get this working, it'd be nice to make an example that just shows how to use the template engine. So I'm going to make context. I'm going to say username. I'm going to give it foamy guy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call render the same way, but we're going to... Oh, no, that's actually really tough, isn't it? Because... Yeah, that doesn't actually work, does it? That would only... This would only really work if the one that was in here worked. Yeah, okay, I guess we just have to make username. So like theoretically, we would read this out of a database or something, right? We would get some dynamic data. So one thing is we would have to make sure to always create the variable that our template is expecting, which means our code is a little bit fragile. Like this code has to know what variables this template is expecting. It would be, honestly, it would be nice if you could pass it to render. It'd be really nice if you could pass it to render, because then I could give it a dictionary and like a star type thing. I mean, I don't, what is that doing though? I mean, it seems like it's got some stuff that you could pass it. Yeah, this one's not real clear to me, like... Okay, it passed note to render. Can it get names? If I just... That doesn't really help me. Because username also exists as username. I feel like somehow you must be able to use these to pass your things. To be honest, I'm really surprised that it didn't work when I put it here. Why would this not work? Because inside of render should have a variable called username. Okay, slash template. Let's see if this works. I don't think it will because we tried it before and it didn't, but... yes, slash template. As previously noted. Username is not defined. Name error, name username is not defined. Is it like a star thing that I need to use? But I don't, that doesn't make sense, does it? If I was going to pass a dictionary, I would use the star. I mean, surely it can't work if you just give it string by itself. It doesn't have the name, right? Like, there's no way that can work. You know, I almost want to try to change it to where this render function here accepts a variable called context, and then anytime that it uses one of these things here, it would say string context quotes username. So it would pull it out of the dictionary that came in as context here. We'd have to like really get into the gears of the inner workings of the rendering stuff though to be able to change that, to change the function signature here and to change the places where it accesses these things. But long term, I think that might be nicer because then you wouldn't need to create specifically a variable a variable username. Instead, you could make a dictionary, pass that to render, which this is how kind of Django works as well. Username not defined. It's not like I star it. That's not gonna matter, is it? No. About destructured, yeah. That's what this one is, right? Not sure I'm doing it the right way, but that's what I'm going for. No luck. It sure looks like it would somehow, but I guess the reason it doesn't is because it's never accessing A or D, right? Something like this would have to say like D square brackets username or something like that. It would have to access one of these two variables, but because it's not, it means this just has to exist. That's so weird though, because this one passes note to temple. So hold on, does it work if you just have username but don't pass it? No. Oh. Okay. You actually have to do... So then I guess what you can do is this. Somehow it's able to get the name of that? I didn't know that could work. Nope, that didn't work either. Okay, well now I'm thoroughly confused because we got it to work in here, right? But I have changed it already since then, so it probably doesn't work anymore. But we had a username equals phone. So do you need both? You need to create the variable and then you also need to turn around and pass it? Oh dear. How did we get that to work before? Okay, 1 second. Here we go. We're gonna take this. All right, also I got a BRB in just 1 moment. Okay, double star was for the destructuring, I think, earlier. We're back to just no web, just this. And so, yeah, this I assume does not work anymore. The seek. Somehow we lost our seek. Oh. Okay, that worked. We got Hello Foamy Guy. Our template was rendered with not passing anything to render, but with having a variable called username. Why does this one not work? Did I misspell username or something? My only guess is it's not seeing it because this is in a function. Different. I don't think I returned the response. Yeah, okay. That actually worked, I think. It printed all the right stuff. We want to not be printing part, though. We want to be counterintuitively putting it into a string, taking up more memory. Okay, rendered template equals a string. Instead of printing, we want to be going just plus equals, or append? No, append is for lists. Turn response. We will need to import from that, and then we want the response takes the request, and then it takes the string, which is rendered template, and then it takes a bunch of stuff we don't need, I don't think. Status, headers, cookies, content. Yeah, we don't need any of that, I don't think. Oh, content? Maybe we need content, actually. Content type. I think. Is that the right content type? I think, maybe. All right, I got a good feeling about this one. I think we're almost there. So close. Okay, actually, I think I get it, because that is because... So that is because username is a global variable, and when we declare it inside this function, we're making a separate variable, even though it has the same name. It's in a different scope. This is actually a different variable, and the one that gets used inside of the exec thing here is coming from global, which we set to none. So we need to change the global variable which the way that I'm familiar with doing that would be saying global username. And then later on here, when we change username, we should be now changing this variable username, not creating a new one inside of this new scope. Which I guess this is probably just a quirk of exec for some reason. For some reason, it seems like exec is only seeing our global variables, not the variables that are in the same function that it was executed from, which actually feels kind of awkward to me. But honestly, exec altogether is kind of awkward, so that's how it goes, I suppose. Fingers crossed. Yes, I've done it. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, this is not the best. I would prefer not needing to do the global variables like this. Like, I really think the best way would be a dictionary right here. I think this would be super duper cool if we could just pass that dictionary. That way you don't need to, because the difficult part is like, these things could be dynamic potentially. Like, I don't want to have a hard-coded variable called username. Instead, I'd rather have a string that's a dictionary key, because that string could be dynamic in some way, right? We could pull it out of the database, or we could pull it out of the data the user sent us, or we could, make a decision and it could be one of 5 things, or just different stuff like that. Whereas this is a lot more difficult. We need specific global variables named after every single variable we want to use inside the template. Which is just kind of a lot. Let's do a list real fast, just to do something a little bit cooler. Let's call this data list is a list, and this is going to contain some strings. Okay, data list, global, data list. In this case, I'm not going to change the value of it. I'm just going to keep it how it is. I don't know if this breaks it. I'll take it out for now because it's confusing. I'd like to maybe change the code so that it can work that way, if we can, possibly. Yeah, so we need to edit our template. So ul. Okay, that failed miserably. Okay, yep, let's delete that. ul, and the closing one also. For, nope, it's like this one. For item in data list. Li item end for. I should look back at the README and make sure that's the right syntax, because totally basing that off of Django. Yeah. Cool. Save it. One of the interesting things is, I think because our template is in a different file, and because our CodePy did change because I added data list. Never mind. I was going to say because our CodePy didn't change, I don't think I need to restart, but we do because we added data list. Wrong browser. Yes. Oh, I think we have a injection problem, actually. I think we have an injection problem. So it'd be interesting if we took this one step further and stored our list in a JSON file and then started this as none like we did username, and then inside of our view, what I consider a view, this function here, we could read our JSON, JSON loads it, and then render our template. And then if we did that, I think we could change our data. Like I could modify that JSON file, and because I have auto reload off, it would not restart the running server. The server would stay running, but the JSON file would get updated. So the next time we called that view, it would actually read the newer file, which would be cool because then we could update the data without the server restarting. Yeah, that's not ideal. That is not ideal. Yeah, so the reason that this one got messed up is because it inserted a literal UL onto the page. We'll want to run, boy, that's tricky. We would probably want to run the data, run the strings through the function we have that replaces. Oops, I did $. We have a function that replaces these in the library. Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, let's do a slightly more practical example. Let me list files. So we could say data list equals os.list dir, say root. So this would make it so our dotted list, our UL on the page, will be a list of files. So if we wanted, we could also add anchor tags to them to make them links. However, they're not currently servable, so that wouldn't do us any good. I mean, if everything works how it's supposed to, they're not servable. But that's pretty cool, though, that we got the list like that so easily inside of our template. Yeah, this is pretty sweet. The global variable thing, I would definitely change if I could, and I intend to try to make it so it's a dictionary here instead of global variables. I'm a little squeamish about the exec. Yeah, I'm a little squeamish about the exec. But truthfully, I don't think we're going to get away from that with this library, right? If we're going to use this utemplate library, I don't think we're going to get away from that, because even the way it works in the real one is not using exec, but it's using import. But I believe that's effectively the same, right? That's executing code that's inside there. And frankly, I think we're probably just very, very unlikely to be able to have pretty much any of these highlighted functionalities and features. I think it would be way, way, way harder to have these if we were not using exec or import. Because basically the reason these work is that exec/import. It's actually interpreting it as Python code. Not set, I guess. Set's a little bit differently, but it's going to be creating a variable back in there with Python code. in a similar way. The basic like variables, just being able to substitute a string, that we could get without exec for sure, no problem. If you want to do things like concatenating strings together with plus signs, then it gets a little bit harder. Like if we wanted to say hello username so like here, because it's using exec, I'm pretty sure we could say username plus I think we could concatenate this together like this. That time I actually only changed the template, so I think I can just refresh. Yeah, see, so we're able to put like arbitrary Python expressions in here, like this plus sign between these two strings. If we did not have the exec, we would not be able to do that. But we could potentially have single substitutions. So like, this kind of thing could potentially work without exec. It would need to be coded differently, but it could potentially work. But all of this stuff is super useful and is closer to how Django works, which is what I'm kind of relating this to in my mind. So I think, honestly, it's kind of just going to come with the territory, and it's basically like be very careful, don't expose it to the internet, and then realistically we should try to do as best as we can at preventing arbitrary Python code execution, which may not even be possible. I don't know for a fact that it is possible. But anytime we're calling exec and passing in a string that ultimately contains other strings that came from users, I gotta wonder if there's a kind of arbitrary execution vulnerability there. So probably gonna wrap it up here pretty soon. This one doesn't print. So I will say in the case of the string, I do believe that this is relatively safe against arbitrary execution, because whatever you put in here is going to get passed a string, which means any kind of Python code that's in there is just going to be inside of a string and not get executed. Somehow you would need to break out of this function called a string. If you could get your Python code to like just slip in at the end of this file after the triple ticks or something like that. Then you could get some arbitrary execution. Or if there are any of these that don't pass it through a function like string like this, then theoretically you could name your variable os dot whatever or something like that. I don't know. Something to consider for sure. Especially triple super duper, especially if you ever intend to use the server on a network with real users, and like insanely extra, even more so if you intend to put it on the internet, which I do not necessarily. This bit's a little weird too, where we have to call render. Have to call render with even though it doesn't exist technically, right? It's existing because of this, which PyCharm doesn't know about. Would be nice if we could have a way to tell it that that existed, maybe. Sure, if we set it to none or something. Another thing to test would be the two templates, though, right? Because I do still question exec is just defining a render function each time, which we are then calling, which in our case is fine because our template is just one template and it's not changing. Therefore, our exec is not really changing. But if we had two of these views, which had two different templates, we would then call exec on both of them at two different times, one for one page, one for another page. Technically, at that point in my mind, we have two functions called render that are defined. So then when we call render, what happens? Does it call the newer one? Does it just break? Does it break as soon as we call exec? Not actually sure what it will do, but that is something else to test, and I think it is going to come at a later time. So I think I am going to wrap it up for now. I will say thanks for hanging out today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Let's see, could we find maybe? Should we try to play it forward on the rating? Let's see, I don't know how to do that. I would have to find somebody on. Let's see if we can. I'll give it a quick second and see if I can find something real fast. Otherwise, I'll just. Hey, thanks for the follow. Appreciate that, Zynim. It's nice of you. Appreciate that, friend. Let's see what we got here. Here. Look at the pigeons. Pop out palette for A Sprite. That's pretty cool. Looks like this person is working on the programming of A Sprite, which is pretty cool. A Sprite is a program for making sprite assets for games. If I understand what this person's doing, I think that's finishing touches and key art. Looks like they're working on the interface for A Sprite, which is pretty meta, so that's kind of cool. So I think we'll raid over to them. Thanks for the raid earlier. Again, Producer Wolf, appreciate that. Thanks for all the folks that stuck around. Hope everyone has a good rest of your day, good weekend, and all that such stuff. I will see you next time. I'll be back certainly next Saturday at this time. Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. are kind of my usual time slot for streaming, so you can usually find me then. I do occasionally pop on at other times, so you can, of course, follow me over on Twitch if you want notifications or anything like that. So I will get the raid going. We're going over to Carb's Code. Yeah, and I'll see you all next time. Let's go live channel. Do that one. Start the raid. Unable to raid. I think people can disable raids, maybe? Yeah, and it does not seem like it wants to let me raid that one. Let me try one more. If it doesn't let me, then I'll just cut it off. Is anybody doing Python if we search Python? Running a program that counts? Tactical board game? That sounds pretty cool. Here's a different game dev we'll do. This is Simul Shift. There we go. Seems like that one's going. Ready to raid in 8. Thanks again, everybody. I'll catch you next time. Raid now.